Welcome everyone to this HowNow webinar. My name's Aaron Spencer, Product Manager here at HowNow, and I'm joined by my colleague Alfie, Customer Success Manager at HowNow. And today in this session, we'll be looking at using data to drive your L&D strategy, how to find insights that guide decisions. So in this, what we'll cover is why you need to be guided by data, establishing the type of data that's useful to you, how to use data beyond the obvious, driving growth through insights and information. We'll take a look at the cycle of data and continuous improvement, and using HowNow to find opportunities for growth. So let's begin. Why do you need to be guided by data? Data should demonstrate a value or help you improve. If not, you might be doing it wrong. That's where the old habit of accepting whatever an LMS spits out can die hard. It's data for the sake of data, not the specific insights related to your efforts or people. Get a better understanding of L&D's role in achieving business impact objectives. Align your learning and development objectives and initiatives with wider goals. Has the sales cycle shortened as a result of training or courses you've implemented? Being able to demonstrate solid business impact will add weight to your meetings and pitches when you need to hold your own against senior decision makers should they question you about return on investment. Insights help paint a picture of which content is most used and most influential. And then use numbers to understand and improve culture, know which topics and channels interest your people.
Fabulous. Yes, thank you, Aaron. Hello everybody. My name is Alfie, and I'll be covering establishing the type of data that's useful to you. So regardless of our field, the way that we use data is forever changing, and it should always be open for consideration. It's super important to be very critical with the data, and as Aaron just touched on, breaking old habits dies hard. We should be very critical, and those habits of just accepting whatever data points are the easiest to find or most presented probably aren't the most useful ones. So there's really two main things to consider, and you can break these down into hard and soft benefits of using the data. The hard benefits, for example, are the ones that are very specific and tangible. These are things like reducing costs for implementing training, reducing the hours spent learning, perhaps during an onboarding process, or even helping to facilitate higher productivity and engagement. It also means that you could potentially be increasing the time spent learning if that's a goal for your organization as well. These things, the hard benefits, are usually more quantitative and provide a little bit more specific data on how people are performing, their engagement, and how much time they spend on the platform, for example. But then you also have to consider the soft benefits as well. So these include things like higher productivity within a specific area of the business. And this will be measurable as an outcome directly of L&D activities, or it could be on a wider acceptance of the L&D platform or processes, perhaps. It also includes things like improved sentiment about and engagement with certain elements of the L&D journey. So this could be people speaking particularly favorably of the platform like HowNow, for example, or it could be regularly consulting with your teams and your people to decide what content is useful to them and getting their insight into whether they think that you're providing the things that are necessary to them. These are slightly harder to quantify and because you're mostly gathering data around people's thoughts, their actions, and it's more qualitative data. But when we talk about it, we should always consider the human element of L&D as well. There's a reason that this often falls within the remit of people. And this is because another part of how you measure your impact, especially specifically within L&D, is by comparing your L&D objectives against very specific and measurable metrics. So we always encourage you to be very human when you look at data. Becoming obsessed with an outlier, for example, is going to kind of cloud your vision of how the general rule versus the exception. It's also very easy to measure things like completion and assessment scores and focus on just these as things like compliance content. When you're covering very macro topics, things like health and safety, GDPR, you want the opportunity to ensure that not only is the data being absorbed, it's also being retained. So it's good to know what training is being done, but it's much better to know and understand the effect of the training. So if, for example, you're creating a brand new health and safety course and you're letting your teams know that there are certain procedures and policies in place, do you then notice a marked decrease in health and safety issues that arise in the workplace, for example? We should also consider reviewing some of the data surrounding sentiment, as we touched on before. What are people very responsive to? What do they feel very engaged with? Not just using assessment scores, for example, to see what content is being retained. For example, if you've launched a diversity and inclusion course for your people, how do you know that the message is getting across? Have you noticed improved language in the workplace? Are you questioning unconscious bias a little bit more? These are all valuable and valid points of being able to assess the validity and the value of your content that you're putting out. Don't forget to identify your soft data as well too. For example, if your employees are searching for content around time management, conflict resolution, complaints processes, for example, these are also opportunities for you to develop further content, to develop further learning and development opportunities as well. Ultimately, it comes down to being able to give your teams the skills that they need to be able to do their jobs properly.
Those are some really great points that you've raised, Alfie, and they can also be tied into our next section, how to use data beyond the obvious. So going beyond the surface level data, is it enough to look at how many people attend an event? Do we know how long they were engaged for? Was there any behavior change after the event in terms of content view? So a bigger picture starts with better insights. So let's take a look at some of these points. Imagine you're hosting an event. Most people look at attendance as a sole metric. But do you know at which point they lost interest or dropped out? Views on related content might give a better indication of whether they really found it interesting. But correlation doesn't always mean causation. So don't make rash assumptions. Views don't always equate to value. Something might have thousands of views, but maybe there's been very few in the past 6 months. Or maybe the open view rate is incredible, except people leave in a minute. Perhaps the content actually ticks all the boxes, but it's the only one most people view on that topic. There's no progress to the next related content. Which metrics matter to you or indicate value?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Aaron. Thank you for sharing. So next we'll touch on driving growth through insights and information. If, for example, your heavy hitters and high performers are viewing particular courses and content, how do you help others build exactly the same skills? Did your best deal closers, for example, all take a particular course, or did they view resources from certain sources? You can also use your insights to identify trends between content and specific people to see what's working for you as a team. Think also about how L&D can support your business and team goals. If the sales team, for example, need to create more outbound leads, but prospecting isn't a skill or necessarily some learning that they've got under their belt, that's an opportunity for you to create a team goal and potentially more sales as revenue. If, for example, your customer support teams are confident about troubleshooting a product, but they need to brush up on their tone of voice, bridge the gap with L&D. It's very easy to identify those kind of skills gaps and offer the opportunity to develop even further. Ultimately, we're talking about whether our people, as I mentioned before, have the skills needed to achieve their goals. And not just their individual goals, but also the goals of the organization as well. This could arguably be the best opportunity to use L&D to show impact and drive growth. You have the insights to understand which skills are lacking, to what extent, and also create personalized learning pathways to close that gap. So this is another time to think about the soft and hard support or benefits you bring to the table. Understanding them play a key role in managing and setting really clear expectations. There are soft and hard benefits to all of L&D. And this is where we touch on the cycle of data and continuous improvement. So this is a little bit of a quick reminder to be a bit more selfish with your data. Use it to refine your strategy over time. There is no one and done approach to using data. Much like creating content, it's always about understanding what you need on a specific day and being able to add value on top of it after creating a really strong foundation. By creating more of the content that has a lot of impact and taking more of the actions that bring results. That's the best way to develop this over time. When L&D is following orders, we can align to a certain extent, but we can't help shape the business goals or get a really true understanding of where the challenges and the problems really come from. When you're armed with development data and an understanding of your learners as people, then L&D plays a really effective role as a consultant when they're involved early in the process. If you imagine the wider business goals to improve customer satisfaction and stakeholders, presume adding more staff solves the issue, L&D's role becomes one of onboarding and training those new reps. But what if we know that response times are the biggest customer pain point, for example, within your customer support teams? And by integrating learning into the right tools, you'll be able to create more micro-learning opportunities. Can you then support reps in shaving minutes off of that closure window, for example? There's a really huge understanding between knowing a goal is to improve customer satisfaction and understanding the problems that have led you to that point in the first place.
Right, so we've gone through some really great points throughout this webinar. So now let's look at using HowNow to find opportunities for growth. Continuous growth can be tracked using qualitative and quantitative data. It's these two components that enable managers, senior decision makers, and L&D team to identify types of progress, proving that your strategy will bring positive return on investment. Being able to identify such data will drive growth, as you won't be solely focusing on just the numbers, but also becoming aware of the wider picture, as we mentioned before. Your learners must first be given a reason to learn, to make their development an intrinsic learning experience. To do this, you'll need to promote a solid yet independent learning culture by using metrics to recognize where to start building, redesigning, or maintaining, because it's working, your L&D strategy. Now, if we look at using data on HowNow to review opportunities, we have different ways that we can do this, but let's just touch on some examples here. So assessments, not only will a consistent review of correct answers show how well learners know the content, but it can reveal the types of subjects, themes, and areas mentioned in a user's responses. So this is true with open answer questions and also multimedia assessments as well. You'll discover who your subject matter experts are and can use this information to showcase just how they'll drive your organization forward. Insights, such as average time spent per week, daily engagement graph, and content viewed, are just some examples of how we can, again, further open this up. So combine the data from these sources to demonstrate the value of intrinsic learning. The gradual growth in each of these areas shows that learners are becoming more independent and not relying on info from others. It shows they're spending more time learning and engaging with more content. So this means they're independently upskilling themselves to handle more of the responsibilities that will eventually arise within your organization. Then we have job roles. So more organizations need to ensure all departments stay consistently upskilled. Using the job role data is an effortless way to recognize which skills apply to which roles and where you can close skill gaps and increase learning as well. And then another example that we will provide is content. So go as granular as you need to. Identify how many people have completed the material, during what specific time periods, and for which groups, for example. These numbers and ranges can make life a lot easier for you when your L&D strategy includes having, say, X number of team members trained up by a specific month or quarter. So now that we've discussed some of those, let's have a quick overview of these on the HowNow platform. So we're now on the HowNow platform, and we can have a look at some of these examples that we have discussed. So again, there are different ways that we can use insights and data and information to our advantage. But of course, these are just some straightforward examples to show you. So the first one is assessments. So when you're on the assessments page, you click assessments, find your assessment, and then click through onto that assessment. You'll be met with the entry for the person who has actually completed that assessment. So you open the answer by clicking view. And this will take you to the assessment page in which you can see the entry that they've given. So here is an example of an assessment that has been produced for a user, and they've given an open answer response. So an open answer assessment allows you to go beyond the they got this correct, so they know the answer mentality, and it opens you up to really using qualitative data and information so you can identify what it is they actually know and how they understand the scenario or the task, and what approaches they might give in a real-time business situation, say with clients, for example. So you can have your question, and then The user, they can give all of the responses in detail. So this is just an example, but they can go into as much detail as they like. And this will help you to identify exactly the key things that they really truly know, as opposed to an MCQ where it may just be a straight direct answer and that's it. So then we move on to insights. So there are many different elements on the insights page, but I'll just have a look at some of these. So we've got average time spent. So this box here will show you the average time spent per user per week. Now this number is very interesting and important for your organization, because if it's low, then that's maybe an indication that you may need to perhaps produce more comms around the learning culture and the importance of taking time out to learn and to study. So that may be one of the ways that you can use that. Also, it may be an instance where you need to work more with team managers to help learners manage their heavy workloads. So if you see that the number is very, very low, then this could mean that there is an issue with perhaps getting that balance between learning, training, and also getting their tasks done. So again, you can collaborate with team managers to best figure out ways to tackle that. Then we have daily engagement. So the daily engagement graph gives you a nice overview of how your users are interacting with content on a day-to-day basis in terms of numbers. So as we can see here, we just hover over this bar and we've got a number. So this is great because it helps us to recognize engagement trends based on daily or weekly learning patterns. So you may see that learners always seem to engage the most towards the end of the work week, or perhaps they never engage on Mondays. So this data will help you to target your L&D strategy based on the days where you have the most learner focus and concentration will be at its peak. Then we have total content viewed. So we have this box here, which shows us the total amount of content viewed by users. But let's say we want to have a look at a specific team. So we'll do that. And as you can see, our data has now changed. So this will be a quick indicator of how much content has been consumed by your chosen team and whether your strategy for specific teams is on the right trajectory. So if you have a goal that says, okay, let's say marketing team, we want them to consume X amount of content, in the next however many months, then you can quickly look at this and see if you're on that, on that right path. So the next area we'll look at is job role. So with job role, you click onto this page and you'll have a list of all the job roles throughout your organization. So in this example, I've searched for operations manager, and you can see I've got 4 users who hold that job role. And then, of course, we can see all of the data related to those users who hold that job role. So 20 skills across those users, 22 assessments that have been done, etc. So if we use this operations manager example, if part of our L&D strategy is to increase productivity within our operations team, we can use job role insights to say, we have highly skilled operations managers. We know that they hold lots of knowledge that can help push the operations team to further success because, of course, we can see that they have X amount of skills, for example. And if the number of assessments or skills was low, let's say, then that would give us an indication that we should produce more assessments or perhaps even learning pathways to upskill them, thus helping them to boost the productivity of their operations team members. So this, again, is a nice, quick way to find out exactly what's going on in different departments and with different job roles as well. Then finally, we have content insights. So with content insights, when we click on the page, we'll have a list of all of our insights, but then we can select or search and then select our chosen content type. So that's what I have right here. And of course, we have different things going on this page. So we can, again, use the average time spent to help us figure out exactly how our users are engaging with this content. So if the average time spent is quite long for that particular content, then we can get an idea of whether this is content that's a bit too hard, a bit too difficult, and maybe we need to change the level or the intensity of the material within that course or whatever the content is. We can use the date range to basically see how our users have been progressing during certain months, for example. So you can see we have the date range set here for the month of February. So if more users completed it in the first month, let's say, compared to our current month, or vice versa, that enables us to question, well, what exactly caused this behavior? If there are assessments, as we scroll towards the bottom, within this, so for example, course, we compare it with the progress percentage. So to see how the addition of assessments in certain sections of a course may positively or negatively affect progress over time. So maybe if we find that we have very intense assessments that are quite difficult towards the beginning of a course, then that may negatively affect how users are progressing through the content. And we may need to change that and switch that up to benefit the learning and help our learners to kind of go through it a bit easier. So those are just some of the examples of those points across the HowNow platform.
So yes, thanks everyone for joining us for using data to drive your L&D strategy. My name's Alfie and I'm Customer Success Manager as a refresher, and I've been joined by Aaron Spencer, the Product Manager from HowNow. If you have any further questions, you can always reach out to us via email or get in touch with us via the little support intercom bot on the platform. But yes, we hope you enjoyed, and yeah, please join us for our next webinar.
Thank you guys. Take care.